Hello and welcome to PaTTAN's podcast series, Leaders in Literacy and Learning. My name is Dr. Pam Kastner, and I have the honor of serving as PaTTAN State Lead Consultant for Literacy. This podcast series is focused on interviewing experts in the field and also aligning that knowledge to practice, to support practice in the field. Today, I have the honor of welcoming Dr. Roland Good to this podcast series. Dr. Good is the president of Dynamic Measurement Group. He is the co-author with Ruth Kaminsky of DIBELS Next, DIBELS 6th edition, and all prior DIBELS, which are now referred to as Acadience Reading. He has been a professor, a university professor, a school psychologist, and a teacher. And today he also referred to himself as an uber geek. So we're so fortunate to have Dr. Good here with us today at PaTTAN Harrisburg. Our conference room 1 is absolutely packed to the rim with folks here today to learn about Pathways of Progress. So for those folks who could not attend today's training, we're very, very grateful to you for being willing to talk to us about Pathways of Progress. So is there anything else you'd like our audience to know before we move on to Pathways about you?
Oh, well, that pretty much does it. I would say that this whole work around DIBELS 6th, DIBELS Next, and now Acadience Reading has really been done with myself and my co-author, Ruth Kaminsky. Mm-hmm. We're sort of the center of it. A lot of people have contributed to this in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So today we're really excited to learn about Pathways of Progress, really supporting students' individual growth. So would you mind sharing a little bit with our audience what is Pathways of Progress and what its purpose is?
Well, Pathways of Progress is a way to inform the goals that teachers set for a student. We really think an individual student learning goal for each student, especially those students who are low, is a part of effective instruction and intervention to change outcomes for them. It's also a way of evaluating the progress or the growth that a student is displaying over the course of the year. I really started my career 30 plus years ago. It's really quite frightening to say that at this time looking back. But I really started with this vision of looking at growth, looking at progress as the important thing that we do as educators. Mm-hmm. A lot of my early career was around slope of progress and rate of improvement ways of looking at it. But I found those just very unsatisfying. And so Pathways of Progress is a different approach to that. And one of the things that makes it different is that it enables us to set a goal for a student that is going to be ambitious. And I can inform an educator who's setting that goal about what level of goal is ambitious or less ambitious or not ambitious, but still be attainable. And I can provide an educator with evidence that others are able to attain this goal. So this is not a crazy goal to set.
Right. Can you talk about that just a tiny bit? Just because of the norm reference. I think that is what's so powerful about Pathways of Progress is the hundreds of thousands of children that you have in terms of this norm reference. So that's being informed by this attainable, ambitious, and meaningful goal. Would you mind just talking a bit about that?
About it being attainable, that others can and have done that. And so we set a goal based upon the student's initial skills, and we focus on the outcome that they get to. So I'm able to look at where they start and where they get to as an outcome. And you're right, this is a normative comparison. So I'm going to look at students who start at a particular level and compared to all of the other students that we have followed from beginning of year to end of year who start at that particular level, I can tell you what would be typical, what would be right in the middle, what would be above typical, and what would be well above typical. I can also talk about what would be below typical and well below typical, places to get to at the end of the year, and then that represents different levels of progress. So if we choose, for example, a goal that would be above typical progress, we know from following students from beginning to end of year that 40% of students are making that much progress or more. So this is a very attainable. That's not to say easy, but attainable. You have to be in that top 40% to be making that level of progress.
So what are the norm sample sizes? Because I was just so impressed with the reference that you're using, the normative references you're using. It's like 400 and some thousand students?
Yes, it was 400 and some thousand students in third grade, and it differs for different grades. The most really in K through 3, a little bit less in 4, 5, and 6, but when I talk about a little bit less in terms of hundreds of thousands, it's a remarkable normative context to consider, yes.
Yeah, so how have you seen schools use pathways of progress, like in the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and at the end of the year? How they use that to inform their instruction and intervention? And also, I know one of the quotes you talked about today was, of course, we collect sometimes a lot of data, but we often don't use it. So I guess, sometimes it's called DRIP, data-rich, information-poor. But we collect data, of course, so that we can help students, so we can instruct them and intervene them. So how have you seen pathways used in a meaningful way with teachers and interventionists to really move students forward?
Well, at the beginning of year, Pathways is critical to set an individual student learning goal. And I would really recommend that for all of the students in the class. This is not intended to be a special ed tool. It's a valuable tool in special ed, but it's not special ed only. Really, this is intended to be for all students. We should be setting an appropriate individual goal for each of the students in our class that is going to represent adequate progress for that student and be attainable and be meaningful for them as well. Then in the middle of the year, so I have a beginning of year initial level of skill, I have an end of year goal that I want to get to. If we just wait until the end of the year, that really does not allow me to guide my instruction or to change what it is that I'm doing. I'm not in control of the path that I'm on. I get to the end of the year, assess again, and the most I can say is, whoops, we
autopsy data. It's over.
Very, very true. A very important function of a middle of the year benchmark is to get a checkup on how all of my students are doing with respect to their pathway of progress and whether or not they're on track to meet that goal. And we really wanted this to be powerful, vivid, available, to have high utility for teachers to make decisions. So I don't want them to spend a ton of time looking at the data. I spend a lot of time talking about how to look at data, but a teacher should be able to look at it and say, oh, little Roland is not on track for his goal. I need to do something to adjust what I'm doing now in the middle of the year and not wait until the end of the year is the idea. So we have a data management system, the Acadience Data Management System, that provides the pathways of progress and the pathways of progress reports. Our partner Amplify has an M-Class data system that provides those pathways of progress reports as well. There are other data systems that have used, have reported for DIBELS Next and may report for Acadience Reading, but they really don't offer pathways of progress. They often have different goals. They're not lined up with our vision. If a school is using some other data management system, we would help them to shift over. Just contact us and we can show. It's very easy to transfer all your historical data into Acadience Data Management. And our focus is on really providing those quick, vivid reports that tell where you are, where you want to get to, and our progress toward that goal.
Yeah, what I love especially about it is the pathways. It sets out these like 5 lines. Do you want to talk about the color coding that's related to those lines in terms of like well above, above, typical, and so on?
Yes. Well, we set out 4 lines, and those 4 lines determine 5 pathways. So if you're below the yellow line, this would be well below benchmark. If you're in between the yellow and light green, you're below benchmark on a pathway. If you're between light green and dark green, that would be typical progress. That is the pathway right in the middle. If you're between the dark green and blue line, that's above typical progress. And if you're above the blue line, that would be well above. And so part of the point of this is on a progress monitoring graph, you have these lines that fan out. And so for any week of the school year, I could give a brief assessment and know at that time what kind of progress that you're making. And incidentally, this was for me a huge difference from things I had tried in the past.
Like rate of improvement.
Like rate of improvement or slope of progress. One of the problems with slope is you need a lot of data points to fit a slope that you have any confidence in, like 20 or more data points to determine our rate of progress. That, I'm going to wait 4 or 5 months to tell if I'm on track or not. This is unworkable. So with pathways of progress, the pathways are known. They're based on hundreds of thousands of students. And at any time, I can measure where we are. I can talk about what level of skills we're at right now. And that means this week, we are making typical progress.
So you brought up Hattie's work at the beginning of the day and talked about how formative feedback and formative progress monitoring, how powerful that is. So do you want to talk about that just for a second?
Yes, and well, we are inspired by Hattie's meta-analysis of meta-analyses, the meta-meta research findings. And he really, of course, there's all kinds of issues that people might have with meta-analyses and meta-analyses of meta-analyses. But the part that was really very inspiring to us was his evidence showing that having a goal, providing feedback to the teacher and the student on progress toward that goal, and using that progress monitoring and formative evaluation to guide instruction all had effects that were solidly in the desired effects zone that really indicate they would contribute. And to me, this is the big deal. If you incorporate these pieces, goals, feedback, progress monitoring, and formative evaluation, whatever instruction and intervention you're using are made more powerful and more effective. And very visible. And visible, and a place that you can be public and share this with users and consumers. I sort of started this, and my son was in first grade, and his first grade teacher had the parent-teacher conference and said his grade in reading was M, which was like meets expectations or something. And every other student in the class had the same score. As a parent, I felt like I had no clue where my son was. I had no clue where he needed to get to. I had no clue if he was making progress toward that.
Nor what he was making progress toward, right?
Exactly.
I think that is the power of what you're providing. It truly is.
We really wanted to provide something that would be readily understandable to parents. Now, of course, I could talk all day and get more geeky, but the basic idea: here's where you are, here's where you need to get to,
and here's your progress.
Here's the path we're going to follow. Here's what I'm going to do about it. Here's what I need you to do to help me do it. Parents are all over that. They get really lined up.
And what I found so valuable too with pathways is not only are we looking at a composite score, which is the best predictor, but we can also look at what contributes to that composite score and set out pathways as well. So
Yes.
in addition to providing very solid guidance based on normative references, teachers have a little bit of their own professionalism that they're bringing into that too. So certainly for a child who is, below basic, we would want to be having a goal that is above typical. But even within those ranges, teachers can bring their own. So they can even set higher goals. As you said, you've been very fortunate to know some amazing interventionists who say, well, that rate of growth or that pathway is very critical, but I think I can go even further. So there's a lot of professionalism there too.
That's a great summary. You're in charge of doing the afternoon.
No.
But that's really exactly the point. The idea of pathways of progress and of our benchmark goals that we provide. And it's not a question of should I use one or the other. Really, they're intended to work together.
Growth and achievement.
Yes.
Yes, together.
Exactly, growth and where you want to get to, yes. But they are intended to inform teacher decisions. They're not intended to make teacher decisions for them. So I can tell you sort of what it means if you make this choice. I can tell you a range that would be above typical, a range that would be above the benchmark goal. But a teacher might choose more or less within that range. And a teacher you should be looking at that student and saying, gee, the major challenge this student is facing is word reading and decoding accuracy. And I need to really emphasize that area. And so I'm going to set a goal that really emphasizes that. And even though I'm going to emphasize this area, that doesn't mean that the other areas are not important. I need to keep a student moving on track in all of the areas to be a proficient reader, but I can pick and choose in a way that really is appropriate for that student.
Do you mind sharing a little bit today? We talked about 3 students. I think it was Renee, Tabitha, and was it Alex?
And Jacqueline.
And Jacqueline. And so they all were reading 65 words correct per minute, but their composite scores were different. And they
very different.
And the reason they were reading 65 words correct per minute were very different. So that's what's exciting too about pathways, that we see that students who have similar scores are there for very different reasons. Of course, we know that because reading is such a complex multifaceted skill, but oftentimes just looking at a score, people will make an assumption that it's for a particular reason. So do you mind just talking about those 3 students just briefly?
Yes, and they were chosen rather deliberately because I made them up rather deliberately, but to illustrate a plausible pattern that you will see. They were all reading at 65 words correct per minute. Yeah. In a lot of the goal-setting approaches that would look at like rate of improvement or slope of progress, and an ambitious goal would be about 2 words correct
That's
per
right. You
week.
set the yes, correct. Yeah.
Then all 3 of those students would have the same goal because they were all at 65 words correct. But Jacqueline had extremely low accuracy and comprehension. So really there was a lot going on with Jacqueline, and the 65 words correct per minute was actually one of her better areas. So I don't need to, the way I say it is for Jacqueline, reading faster is not necessarily going to be reading better. No. It doesn't do anybody any good to be wrong faster, really quickly.
That's right.
So we first need to, for her, emphasize building the word reading and decoding accuracy and paying attention to what she reads and being able to talk about it, to read silently for meaning, to be building meaning. Just emphasizing the rate would be doing a disservice to her. And so she needs a different goal for rate than Renee does. Now, Renee was reading with a high degree of accuracy. Her comprehension was really on track. She was a slow and laborious reader, but all the other pieces were right on track.
Right.
Now, for Renee, reading faster is reading better.
Correct.
And so we need to build her rate. not to be a speed reader,
Right.
but so that she's reading at an adequate rate where she can shift from thinking at the word level to thinking at the sentence level, at the paragraph level, at the passage level. And you need an adequate rate in order to be...
Free up that cognitive desk space to do that.
That's
Correct.
That's
Yes.
it. That's exactly right. So using pathways of progress, an appropriate slope of progress for Renee would be much steeper in words read correct, much shallower for Jacqueline in words read correct, because our emphasis for Jacqueline is not on that reading rate. It's really going to be on word reading and decoding accuracy first, and reading for meaning as well.
It was just so, I think it was illuminating to the group when they really caught on to that, when they said, well, 65, and they're all there for different reasons. Yeah.
And you get different, and Pathways really highlights that and helps an educator make those decisions.
And then you have 3 nice little boxes that you check off, and you say reading for meaning, with an accurate rate and with accuracy. Adequate rate and accuracy. So
and a high degree of accuracy.
So.
And I would argue all 3 of those are critical to be
like a
proficient
3-legged stool,
reading.
right? So you have reading on the top and this 3-legged stool.
Yes, and if we are missing any one of those, our reading proficiency is compromised, and we're not on track. And there are reading for meaning. Everybody is lined up on that. There's little misunderstanding about that. Reading at an adequate rate, there's misunderstanding, and I really emphasize this word adequate for that. This is not about being a speed reader.
Right.
And a high degree of accuracy is the third one, and those are deliberately chosen words. I have to tell you, when I started doing the research on accuracy, I thought, what, 90, 95% accurate? That sounds pretty high to me. No, that's actually not high enough.
Right.
By 3rd grade, if you're reading at like 95% accurate, that's actually a danger signal for end-of-year outcomes and for being on track on state assessments and to meet reading expectations. So we've actually done the research that shows how accurate you need to be in this level of material by when to be on track.
I think that conversation we had earlier today is that 5% that's missing is typically the ones that carry the most meaning.
That's
right?
exactly
They're domain
right.
specific or multisyllabic, and they carry the meaning, and those are the ones the kids are missing. So that high degree of accuracy is so critical.
Yeah, and especially as you're hitting 3rd grade, those multisyllabic words, that's really the name of the game.
It is, for sure. Well, is there anything else that you would like our audience to know about Pathways of Progress, or where they could find out more information besides this podcast?
Well, do come to our website. We are at acadiancelearning.org, or if you just type in Acadience, you will find us. We chose Acadience in part because it's, if you type in Acadience, we are who you get. There isn't anybody else.
Oh, there you go. Okay, that's good.
But we also chose it. Sometimes people ask us why Acadience, and in part it makes us think about academics, and we are really all about academics. It makes us think about a cadence, a set of steps toward a goal or a cadence that we are following. It makes us think about success and experience and about science. So it triggers for us all the right associations that we want to go with.
Well, thank you, Dr. Good. Thank you so much. It's so informative, and we really appreciate you being here today at PaTTAN Harrisburg, but also for doing this podcast.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank John Ragsdale, our producer, and this is Pam Kastner saying goodbye, and looking forward to seeing you next time in the podcast, Leaders in Learning and Literacy. Thank you.